Very dumb, Mr. Too Late, the worst Federal Reserve Chair we have ever had. Imagine hearing these fierce words echoing from the social media platform of the 45th President of the United States. Yes, we are talking about none other than Donald Trump lashing out against Jerome Powell in a brutally candid tirade that has jolted global markets. What on earth is happening here, and how is it connected to our financial reality? In this explosive episode, we will dig deeply into a fiery confrontation, shaking the foundation of American economic policy. From the astonishing drop of the United States dollar to the specter of replacing the Federal Reserve leadership, brace yourselves. This might just be the most intense monetary showdown in recent history. We will delve into it bottom to top. The motivations, the players, and the high stakes involved, leaving no stone unturned. In this journey, we will uncover the backstory of how the United States dollar reached a 3-year low, why Donald Trump calls Jerome Powell very dumb, what major American media outlets say about the 79-year-old politician's alleged plan to swap out the Federal Reserve Chair, and whether or not a radical shift in monetary authority could really happen. Stay tuned as we peel back layer after layer of a conflict that has roamed from the corridors of the White House to the prestigious meeting rooms of the Federal Reserve, and onward to a tense overseas NATO summit in The Hague. Ready to unearth the gritty details? Then let's begin. We start by painting the scene as it stood on a quiet Thursday morning. Quiet, that is, until the news broke that the United States dollar slipped to a deeply unsettling low. According to the Wall Street Journal's widely followed United States Dollar Index, that slip reached a marker of roughly 97.01, representing a drop of 0.5%. It sounds minor, but in the delicate world of currency values, a 0.5% decrease can set off tremors that rock investors worldwide. This particular figure signaled the lowest point the currency had reached since early March 2022. Seasoned analysts, watching everything from commodities to government bonds, collectively held their breath. Why? The swirl of suspicion, rumor, and outright attacks from the president led many to point a finger at the nasty war of words between Donald Trump and Jerome Powell. Neither figure is shy about making public statements. Over the past several years, Trump has made it known that he despises Powell's cautious approach to interest rate adjustments, calling him Mr. Too Late for allegedly waiting far too long to lower interest rates when the administration demanded economic boosts. More recently, as if to hammer the point, Trump took to his very own social media platform, Truth Social, to blast Powell yet again. This time, he slammed the Federal Reserve Chair as very dumb, going so far as to say, "We will be paying for his incompetence for many years to come. If you appreciate a drama-laden moment in political discourse, you will find it here in spades." The sheer scale of these attacks raises a pivotal question. Is the Federal Reserve truly independent if the President of the United States threatens to replace the chair? The Federal Reserve, created more than 1 century ago, prides itself on being insulated from direct political meddling, so it can guide monetary policy based on data rather than campaign pressures. Yet here we have top-level condemnation from Donald Trump, who apparently is not just complaining, he is said to be actively scouting for possible replacements for Jerome Powell. Keep in mind, Powell's official term as Federal Reserve Chair does not expire until mid-May 2026, which suggests that any abrupt dismissal or forced resignation would be a dramatic departure from precedent. Nevertheless, American media outlets are abuzz with sources whispering that the White House is already constructing shortlists of potential new chair candidates, and that an announcement could come sooner rather than later. But hold on, let us ask an obvious question. Could the White House truly fire the chief of the Federal Reserve? It is widely understood that Federal Reserve chairs enjoy a certain autonomy, and for good reason. Reliable investment, both domestic and international, often requires confidence in the central bank's stability. David Rubenstein, co-founder of the investment giant Carlyle, touched upon this exact concern when he spoke on a segment of the Clayman Countdown. Markets, Rubenstein emphasized, want to see the Federal Reserve operating independently of day-to-day political winds. They long for a path where interest rate moves, quantitative easing, and other crucial monetary policies reflect deeper economic realities instead of short-term political agendas. The potential threat from Trump's intensifying language, so this argument goes, undermines that independence, spooks investors, and thereby pushes the United States dollar into a tailspin. Even so, there is more to this meltdown than a shouting match. Certain watchers claim Jerome Powell has indeed been slow to lower rates. They point out that global economic conditions, especially during times of trade wars or supply chain disruptions, often shift unpredictably. Why, these critics ask, wait so long when a rate cut might have staved off certain downturns? Meanwhile, defenders of Powell highlight the Federal Reserve's long-standing practice of carefully reading incoming data on job markets, inflation levels, and consumer spending before passing dramatic rate cuts. Could it be that Powell's approach is safer because it demands thorough data analysis before committing to big decisions? In the midst of the rhetoric, Trump's more personal attacks obscure the deeper policy debate, leaving many uncertain about the real story behind the headlines. Now, let us place ourselves in the seat of the anxious observer who wonders, if Trump truly announces a new chair sooner than the usual process allows, who might that be? One name swirling around is Kevin Warsh, a former Federal Reserve governor known for his experience in policy under previous administrations. Another is Scott Bessent, currently Treasury Secretary and presumably an insider with an established bond of trust with the president. Then, there is Kevin Hassett, who previously served as National Council Director and might align well with Trump on growth-oriented economic policies. David Malpass, who once led the World Bank, has also been thrown around as a potential pick, as well as Christopher Waller, a current Federal Reserve governor with direct knowledge of the bank's daily operations. It sounds like quite the lineup, each with his own credentials, each with his own stance on interest rates, inflation, and regulatory oversight. But shifting from a known quantity, Powell, to an untested unknown would be a gamble in the eyes of many analysts. Remember, the Federal Reserve's policy signals can make or break everything from international trade negotiations to corporate earnings. The timing of these rumors, as the dynamic NATO summit in The Hague was underway, added another layer of complexity. Global leaders might be looking on, somewhat baffled at the United States indulging in an internal spat that threatens to overshadow pressing international economic challenges. At this point, we have uncovered a swirl of controversies and rumors. Did any of these revelations catch you off guard? If so, show your support and let us know you would like more investigations of these dramatic turns by giving us a friendly thumbs up. Small gestures make a big difference when we are trying to navigate these uncharted waters, filled with confusion and speculation. To maintain clarity, let us step back and zoom out. The entire premise for a Federal Reserve is to prevent abrupt and poorly timed decisions that could damage the economy. Elected officials, however, are typically under pressure to show results within relatively short windows, hoping to please a voting public or secure re-election. Jerome Powell, by design, holds a seat that is somewhat shielded from that political cycle. That is the theory, at least. But with Trump casting doubt on Powell's judgment, intelligence, and overall leadership, the framework of Federal Reserve independence might be tested like never before. In many respects, the real question is not simply whether Powell stays or goes. Rather, it is about whether national monetary policy can remain stable when the top leadership seems locked in a personal war. Could a furious president, unhappy with Mr. Too Late, coax a historically measured central bank into a roller coaster ride of big, abrupt policy swings? Or, conversely, could the Federal Reserve remain so entangled in a desire to be the grown-up in the room that it ends up ignoring new flashes of economic trouble, only to take action too late? While swirling rumors might suggest that Trump is ready to name Powell's replacement this fall, other watchers believe Trump may wait for a major political moment to make the announcement, amplifying the drama. Some even hypothesize that the president could push forward the timeline to this summer, letting the country buzz about a new face well before mid-May 2026. If that scenario unfolds, it raises complex legal and procedural questions. Can the president effectively fire the Federal Reserve chair if there is no proven cause, such as gross negligence or misconduct? Historians of monetary policy point out that no modern president has pursued an outright firing simply because of policy disagreement. Then again, in a political era saturated with tweets, posts, and attention-grabbing headlines, the rules are not always set in stone. Another angle to consider is the personal dimension of Donald Trump and Jerome Powell. Trump is known for dismissing anyone who contradicts him or who underwhelms him in the face of adversity. From top cabinet officials to lesser-known advisors, he has repeatedly shown he is not shy about employing the famous catchphrase, "You're fired," from his reality television days. Meanwhile, Powell often projects a more traditional central banker's persona, methodically explaining interest rate moves and citing reams of data. His manner stands in stark contrast to Trump's flamboyant style. Might these clashing personalities be fueling the tension to greater heights? For many observers, the answer is a resounding yes. This saga underscores an underlying anxiety for American voters and global investors alike. What if the ongoing tension signals deeper dysfunction in the broader political financial system? Already, the United States faces unrest regarding tariffs and trade, situations that do indeed demand coordinated policies between the White House and the central bank. With talk of new tariff expansions, some economists warn that this tug-of-war between the president and the central bank chief could make the entire economy more vulnerable to wild fluctuations. The big fear is a scenario wherein the Federal Reserve tries to quell inflations or recession signals while the administration works at cross purposes. Let us also not forget the vantage points of everyday Americans. Home mortgage rates, college loan interest rates, and credit card charges all link directly to the Federal Reserve's approach to interest rates and bond buying strategies. If Trump's statements cause panic and a temporary flight from the United States dollar, those same everyday consumers might feel it in their buying power. A weaker currency could mean higher import costs, rising prices at stores, and a pinch in the household wallet. On the flip side, some companies that export goods overseas might welcome a weaker dollar, as it could make American products more attractive to international buyers. So, it is not all doom and gloom, just a highly volatile environment where winners and losers pivot based on the currency swings. And that, dear listeners, is precisely why so many analysts follow the news on this matter as if reading the next chapter in a high-stakes novel. Speaking of novels, the next plot twist might well emerge at the Federal Reserve's next meeting, scheduled for late July. That is when Powell will presumably either maintain rates, lift them, or cut them, depending on data about inflation, employment, and general economic signals. Will it be a triumphant demonstration of Federal Reserve independence, with Powell ignoring the presidential jabs and forging ahead with a methodical plan? Or will the overshadowing presence of White House pressure push him to adopt a more dramatic move? Markets tend to dislike surprises, so the mere fact that all these tensions loom might rattle investor confidence if policymakers fail to telegraph their intentions clearly. Meanwhile, the president took his attacks a step further at the NATO summit in The Hague. In an off-the-cuff press conference, Donald Trump labeled Powell terrible, a very average mentally person, and claimed that Powell has a low intelligence quotient for what he does. The spectacle felt surreal as leaders of allied countries listened to the American president eviscerate the current Federal Reserve chair. In the same breath, Trump hinted that he already has 3 or 4 people in mind to replace Powell and that he was quite sure he would bring the matter to a head soon. Some European diplomats, unaccustomed to hearing such direct condemnations of a country's central banker, were left shaking their heads, wondering what ripple effects this might have on transatlantic relations. You might be thinking, could Powell simply resign in the face of such hostility? While that is theoretically possible, many believe Powell is determined to finish his term. After all, if he steps down under political duress, it would set a precedent that future presidents may exploit to exert direct control over the Federal Reserve. The central bank's entire structure is designed to prevent easy removal of a chair absent a clear legal or ethical violation. So, unless Powell decides otherwise, it seems more likely he will attempt to weather the storm until at least mid-May 2026. Even if Trump removed Powell from the top role, Powell might still remain on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors until January 2028, continuing to wield influence over policy decisions. That scenario, however, would create an unprecedented dynamic, leaving a former chair and the new presidential appointee to possibly clash within the same institution. One might wonder, is the United States alone in this friction between heads of government and central banking authorities? Historically, tensions have surfaced in various nations whenever big agendas rub against the fiscal or monetary discipline that central banks try to impose. The difference here is the drama that Donald Trump's personal style injects into the mix. It is not just a matter of "we disagree on policy," it is a barrage of harsh epithets: terrible, very dumb, Mr. Too Late, and public proclamations that dangerously blur the lines between legitimate criticism and undermining a critical pillar of economic governance. Which leads us to the big question: how might this all end? Some see a scenario in which Trump publicly criticizes Powell for months on end, but never truly musters the means to dislodge him, eventually accepting a more moderate interest rate path that aligns better with White House growth plans. Others see an inevitable showdown, believing that neither the president nor the Federal Reserve Chair is inclined to back down, which could eventually culminate in a forced ouster or resignation. In that scenario, we could see the United States dollar experience even more volatility, at least short-term, as global markets scramble to gauge the direction of monetary policy under new leadership. The unstoppable force meets the immovable object, if you will. A fresh dimension is Trump's age, and the swirl of rumors about future election cycles. If the 79-year-old politician aims to make a major mark, dethroning Powell might be a piece of that puzzle, a demonstration of boldness to loyal supporters who believe the Federal Reserve has not been aggressive enough in fueling domestic growth. "We will be paying for his incompetence for many years to come," Trump warned, indicating a belief that Powell's leadership has inflicted long-term damage. But is Trump's rhetoric more about forging political narratives than economic truth? Some hold that view, arguing that the administration's real data on job growth, inflation stability, and manufacturing output might not align perfectly with these rhetorical outbursts. To keep perspective, we should remember that the United States dollar still remains a dominant global currency, even at this new 3-year low. Many countries hold large reserves of it, use it for key commodity transactions, and anchor it as an essential form of foreign exchange. While short-term dips matter, the broader question is whether this tension could accelerate a search by other nations for alternative reserve currencies or payment mechanisms. If so, that would be a more far-reaching impact than just a 0.5% drop in the dollar index, potentially altering the entire landscape of international finance in ways that continue well beyond Trump's tenure. In the midst of all these complexities, perhaps the single biggest wildcard is how Powell himself will maneuver. Will he respond to the insults and criticisms, thereby aggravating the feud? Or will he maintain a neutral, no-comment stance, hoping to showcase that the Federal Reserve stands above the fray of personal attacks? We have observed many Fed chairs come and go, each facing different political climates, but few have dealt with a president so publicly combative and unpredictable as Trump. In the absence of a neat script, observers are on tenterhooks, as any fresh statement from the White House, any slip in the dollar index, or any subtle shift in Federal Reserve policy might tip the scales from mere rhetoric into full-on constitutional crisis territory. If you have been intrigued thus far by every turn of this political economic thriller, remember that you can keep the conversation alive by subscribing to ongoing updates. Let us know you want more as soon as fresh details break. After all, these real-world events can pivot quickly, and your curiosity means we will remain on the lookout for each development. Before we conclude, let us summarize the key takeaways. First, the United States dollar recently slipped to a notable low, dating back to early March 2022, prompting investors to watch the currency closely. Second, President Donald Trump unleashed a volley of attacks on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, labeling him incompetent and very dumb, fueling speculation that the president intends to oust him far ahead of Powell's term expiration. Third, a coterie of potential replacements, Kevin Warsh, Scott Bessent, Kevin Hassett, David Malpass, Christopher Waller, may already be vying for the top seat, though such a process would undoubtedly provoke controversy. Fourth, the Federal Reserve's independence hangs in the balance, with global observers warning that direct interference in monetary policy could harm the United States dollar's stability. Fifth, the next Federal Reserve meeting, scheduled for late July, might become a flashpoint for new drama if Powell defies the pressures and maintains current policy stances. Ultimately, the story remains far from finished. We are likely only at an early chapter of this particularly tense saga. Will Trump's provocative calls find fertile ground, or will they fade under the sturdy traditions of the Federal Reserve's autonomy? Only time will tell. One thing is certain: the collision of big personalities, big political stakes, and a currency that plays a central role in global finance is a recipe for drama that the world will be watching for months, perhaps even years, to come.